Hello. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. So good to be with you today. Pastor Mike and Michelle are on some well-deserved leave, so it's so great that Mike could be with us this morning. Well, I wonder if you have noticed that there is a rhythm to our lives. Our lives have a rhythm, they have a pace, they have a flow. There's daily rhythms, monthly rhythms, weekly rhythms, annual rhythms. In fact, we've just finished an annual rhythm of Christmas, and we're in a different one now where it's those few days between Christmas and New Year, and you're not really sure what day it actually is. You can't remember the last time you ate leftovers, but you're probably going to have some more in a couple hours because they're just so good. And you're kind of hanging on to get through to the New Year. It's that hazy time, right? And then we're about to step into another rhythm of the new year, starting 2021, January. And I'd love to know, what does your January 1st look like? What does your January 1st look like, the first day of a new year? Are you someone who hits the ground running? Do you have a list of resolutions, of goals, of plans? You have projects you're going to work on? You have a new exercise regime in mind? Is that you? Is that how you start your new year? Or is it a bit more of a slow-paced day? You're holding on to that haze of between Christmas and New Year's. You don't quite want to let it go yet. You're enjoying the slowing down. What does your January 1st look like? When I was in high school, I worked at the local McDonald's, and I always put my hand up to work the overnight shift on New Year's Eve. I realise that makes me sound very lame because it sounds like I had no better plans when the clock ticked midnight than to work at the drive-thru at McDonald's. But I had a strategy. It was really good pay, because no one ever wanted to work the shift, so you could always get it. Everyone else had plans. And then you got the overnight rate, plus when it ticked over onto New Year's Day, you got the public holiday rate. I always got a beautiful pay packet a couple weeks into January. But it meant that my January 1st was a very sloth-like experience, because I was not used to working overnights. No, it was the only overnight I worked all year long. And so I get home at 6 a.m. and sleep. And then I would slowly emerge at some point, maybe like January 2nd, and sort of pick myself up off the floor and start the new year. I didn't really know what it looked like. It was still a bit of a haze for me. So that was my January 1st for a long time. It's pretty common that we see January as a time to start fresh, to make new plans, to become better versions of ourselves, to create new habits. Maybe we do start that project around the house, or we commit to something new, or we make a new plan to join a new gym. A reset in January is part of our culture's rhythms of life. But I wonder what it would look like if we flip this idea on its head. What if we change the January plan? What if we bailed on this idea of get up and go, hit the ground running, hit the accelerator on your resolutions, be super productive, and flip this time of year to be a time to pause, a time to rest, and a time to listen? And what would it look like to make time to pause, rest, and listen in all of our rhythms? Not just once a year, but in our daily, our weekly, and our monthly rhythms as well. Because in our world today, there is a constant pace of hustle and high pressure to get things done. There often appears to be no rhythm. It's just a flat line of go, go, go. Long to-do list, be productive, hit big targets, tackle big projects, moving and working from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep. And we participate in this. We, the church, we participate in this pressure-filled lifestyle. We're not exempt, because how many of us, when we're asked the question, how are you, respond with busy? How many of us respond to the question, how are you, by saying, I'm so busy? How are you? Flat out. How are you? Exhausted, just got so much going on. How are you? I'm so busy. We quote verses like the one from Matthew that says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. But then we continue to do stuff and do so much and pack heavy burdens on our backs. Have we become human doings rather than human beings? It begs the question, is this what God designed us to be? Don't get me wrong, I believe God wants us to be productive. I don't think he wants us to have the sloth-like January 1st that Ashley had in high school. I think he wants us to do things and be productive because he gave us gifts and talents and skills. But did he create us just to be moving and working all the time? We need a biblical framework that shows us a healthy rhythm of life. One that allows us to be fruitful and productive, but also brings a balance of pause and resting. So, let's go all the way back to the creation story. In Genesis 1:27, it says, "So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them, and then he said to them, 'Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it.'" Be fruitful, he said. This was on the 6th day of creation. He gave man and woman instructions to be productive, to work and to care for the animals and the plants in the garden that he had placed them in. So you'd think that those instructions, once they were given, were meant to be followed straight away. If God says do something, you probably want to do it as soon as possible. But that was on the 6th day. And if we keep reading in Genesis 2:2, it says, "By the 7th day, God had finished the work he had been doing, so on the 7th day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done." So God had done all this work and then he rested. And just before he rested, he created human beings. And human beings were with God all the time and followed what he did. And so that means that the first full day of existence for humankind, we rested. Our first full day on earth, we rested. Then the work began. God allowed us to rest first. So if we are going to live our lives in the way that God designed us to do so, then there is a key principle here for us to notice and to follow. We are actually designed to work from a place of rest rather than rest from our work. We are designed to work from that rest. We are designed to rest first. To rest first. This idea is such a contrast to our current culture. A culture of hustle, a culture of work hard, then play hard. I was introduced to this idea of working from a place of rest about 12 months ago. And God really challenged me to change the rhythms of my life, because I was following the pattern of go, 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 collapse, go, 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 collapse, push, 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 work really hard, collapse, rest, recover, and pick it up and do it again. And it just wasn't working. And so God really challenged me to change this, and I am still learning. But I've been able to schedule rest days into my week, and I'm able to make seasonal holidays a priority. So back in August, I booked some leave that I'll be going on in a couple of weeks in this January season. I have 2 rest days a week that are in my diary, and I try not to move them or change them. Working from a place of rest has been such a game changer for me, particularly in a year like 2020, that in my context felt relentless at times. It felt like there was always work to be done, always things to decide and to pivot and to change and to organize. But I always knew that I had time scheduled into my week to pause, to rest, to listen to God, to recharge, ready to then keep going. And I was able to work from that place of rest. It's what sustained me. Now I'm working on building this pattern and pace into my daily rhythms. We were created to work from a place of rest. If we're going to feel the command that God has given us to be fruitful, to do all the things that he has called us to do, then we have to start from a place of rest. It's January, it's summer season, and things tend to quieten down in our society. And so I'd love to ask you, how can you take a time to pause and rest right now? Now, I recognize we all have different contexts, and perhaps January is actually a peak time for you. I worked at a local pool. I could not rest in January. I no longer work at that local pool, and I'm thrilled that I can rest in January. But for some of you, that's your reality. This is your peak time, and I totally understand that. But I want to ask you the question, when can you rest before your peak time? When can you make time to stop and to pause and to recover? Because how many of us actually schedule days of rest and relaxation on the calendar before we schedule meetings, projects, work, activities, commitments? That is not a normal thing to do in our culture. But God designed us to rest first. So I wonder, what would it look like for you to create rhythms of rest at every level of life? Daily, weekly, monthly, seasonal, annual rhythms of rest. And not rest as in you've pushed really hard and now you need to collapse, but intentional rest to charge up, to fill your tank before you step into work, to rest first. And you know what? Let's be gracious with ourselves in this, because it's so different to our culture. So maybe just pick one rhythm. I started with weekly. What rhythm for you can you take and change and adjust to bring rest first? And it's also important to think beyond just setting aside that time and asking the question, well, how do I rest? What actually fills my tank? How do I switch off and charge up? There's three important things to remember when we think about resting. First off, rest is unique to everyone. How do you rest? What fills your tank? Figuring out how God designed you is actually really helpful when it comes to working out how to rest well. Are you an introvert? Do you get your energy from being alone? Are you more extroverted? Do you get your energy from being with people? Do you feel recharged if you're in nature, or if you're reading a book, or if you go to a cafe by yourself, or if you spend time with loved ones? What is it that fills up your tank? Because what is my rest could look really different to how you rest well. So take the time, experiment, test things out. I have absolutely tried things on my rest days that I worked out are not relaxing for me. And then I've tried a different thing the next week and it's been really recharging. Don't be afraid to figure out how you rest well, because rest is unique to everyone. And as we're figuring that out, we can also follow Jesus' example, because Jesus rested. We see in the Gospels that he had extended times of retreat. So in Mark 1, he spent 40 days in the desert before he went into his time of ministry and work. He also had regular daily times of quiet resting with the Lord. In Mark 1, we read that he got up early and went to a quiet place to pray. And we see that a few times in the gospel. That was part of his daily and weekly rhythms, was to go and take some time away to pray and sit in God's presence. And then one that's really interesting is that Jesus also taught the disciples how to rest. They were in the middle of a revival in Mark 6, and the disciples were so excited, coming and telling Jesus about all that they'd done and all that they were ready to keep doing. And he said, awesome, let's rest and eat some food. Let's charge up so we can keep going. And so who is it in your world that you can model what it looks like to rest first? Is it parents with your kids? Do you mentor someone? Even just your peers and your family? How can you model this idea of resting first? And last, and certainly not least, is resting with God. God is with you. God is with us. And so we can actually rest with him. We can rest in his presence. When you go for a run, or go to the beach, or play golf, or have a coffee, or go to a party with family and friends, God is with you. So tune into his presence. How can you tune into his presence as you are resting? How can you connect with him? And we can't miss this part, because it is so crucial to our rest. It's this idea of connecting with God's presence and abiding in him. Jesus speaks about this in John 15, verse 1 to 8. If you've got your Bibles, you can grab it out. It was John 15, 1 to 8. Otherwise, it'll be on the screens. Jesus says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Abide in me and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and withers, and the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire and burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples. Jesus gives a profound picture of the vine and the branches as he explains what it means to abide in him, to abide in God. A branch can't bear fruit without the support, the nutrients, the life from the vine. Without staying connected to a vine, a branch will wither and die. Staying connected to the vine is a picture of abiding in God, of staying connected with him. Abiding in Jesus, abiding in God means engaging in an intimate relationship with him. Enjoying and cultivating this relationship that gives us life, hope, strength, and ultimately gives us everything we need to bear fruit, to be productive. Author Gary Burge says, discipleship, it's following Jesus, is not just a matter of acknowledging who Jesus is. It is having Jesus spiritually connected to our inner lives. To be connected to the vine means that the life of Jesus is flowing through us. And this is what leads to fruitfulness. Jesus says, abide in me and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. Apart from me, you can do nothing. And bearing fruit then is a byproduct. It's a result of being connected to Jesus. Fruitfulness will be an inevitable outcome of an inner spiritual life with Jesus, an intimate connection with him. It all comes from the vine. So, let's make time to connect with the vine, to abide in Jesus, to abide in God. Abiding in Jesus and his presence is part of a healthy rhythm of life. This rhythm is similar to a pendulum. So I want you to imagine a grandfather clock. Have you ever seen one of those with the pendulum inside? It's swinging back and forth at a steady pace, a steady rhythm. It needs to swing one way so it can swing the other way. The rhythm of life that Jesus teaches and that the creation story teaches is like a pendulum. We've got a diagram up on the screen of a healthy rhythm of life. This pendulum, you'll see the arrows. To get to work and fruitfulness, it needs to swing back into rest and abide, to then swing forward into growth and work and fruitfulness, and then back into rest and abide and into fruitfulness, and then back into rest and abide and into fruitfulness. And this needs to happen at a consistent pace and a rhythm. A rhythm of life. Abide, into grow, and back into abide. Something we don't want to miss from this passage in John is that sometimes when we return and we pull into abiding again, we might need to allow God to do some pruning. Now, I have zero gardening knowledge, and I will be the first to admit that, but my mum loves gardening. So as I was reading this passage, I was like, Mum, why do plants need to be pruned? Why do vines need to be pruned? I don't quite understand. And she explained it to me, and I kind of wrote some notes. And so this is what my mum said. She said, pruning happens to generate new growth. After a branch has finished bearing its best fruit or its best flowers, it needs to be pruned back so that it can grow great fruit again, rather than continuing to grow and becoming overgrown and out of control. It's about producing the best fruit possible. This is the pruning that Jesus is talking about when he says, my Father is the vine dresser, my Father is the gardener. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes. that it may bear more fruit. God the Father is the one that prunes. The process of pruning then becomes about tuning in and listening, asking God to show you what are the bad branches that do just need to be cut away, but actually, what are the good things that are bearing fruit but might need to be cut back for a season so that they can continue to grow fruit into the future. So as you abide, what is God bringing to your attention that needs pruning? I had a pruning experience about a year ago, January last year. Like I said, I'd just been introduced to this idea of working from a place of rest. And I was listening to God and I was asking him, is there anything that needs to be pruned in my life? And I had a sense that there was, but I didn't have a clear sense of what it was. And so I just sensed God was saying, just sit tight, trust me, I'll let you know when I need you to allow me to prune something. But right now, I'm just working on it. And I was like, okay. So I decided to wait for a really clear sense to act on that. And then I had what I like to call a smack-in-the-face conversation with someone in my support network who helped me realize the sheer fullness of my diary, the sheer fullness of my weekly rhythms. I had a lot of really good things on my plate at the time. I had 2 great part-time jobs that I really loved. I was serving with extra responsibility in our youth ministry here at Clovey. I was serving as the ministry assistant to Dubsy. And I love doing that because I love what I was learning and growing in. And I love our youth. I think they're awesome. And I was part of a fantastic life group, and I was spending time with family and friends, and I was also managing my life like a normal human being. And basically my diary was so incredibly full. We wrote out what I did every day of the week, and every day of the week I was working or volunteering and then doing life stuff as well. And so I had all these good things on my plate, but I had no space and no time to stop and to rest. I was overgrown. I wasn't producing good fruit anywhere. Even though I was doing really good things, I wasn't producing good fruit anymore. And so something had to be pruned. Something had to be cut back. And that's the whole point, is that pruning is not cutting away and destroying. It's about reducing. And even good things need to be pruned. And so as I sat and listened to God in that conversation, it became really clear that what needed to be pruned back was my role as the ministry assistant. And that really sucked. I was really bummed about that. I loved what I was doing. I loved working with Dubsy. If you know Dubsy, he's heaps of fun. But he's also really wise and was teaching me so much about what I thought God wanted me to do in my future. And it really sucked. But it was the only thing on my plate that I could prune at the time. And I really had sense that God was affirming, yes, that's the thing that I was nudging you about, in this process. And so I decided to remove that responsibility and kind of prune back literally in the youth team. So I didn't leave the team. I didn't bail altogether. I still love serving on that team, but I pruned back my responsibility as ministry assistant. And in the conversation that I had with Dubsy about that, I realize now I actually explained what pruning was at the time without realizing that's what I was doing. I remember saying to him, I have to do this because no one is getting the best version of Ash right now. No one was getting the best version of me. No one was getting good fruit. I wasn't getting good fruit. This ministry wasn't getting good fruit. My work wasn't getting good fruit. My family and friends were not getting good fruit. No one was getting the best version of Ash because I was so overgrown. There were just too many good things on my plate. There is a quote from Tom Wright that I really love. He says, and though it always hurts, we must be ready for the Father's pruning knife. God is glorified, and so will we be, by bearing good quality fruit and lots of it. For that to happen, there will be extra growth that needs cutting away. There will be extra growth that needs cutting away. That too is an intimate process. The vine dresser is never closer to the vine, taking more thought over its long-term health and productivity than when he has the knife in his hand. I look back now and I see that during that pruning process, even though it was not fun and it was painful, God had my long-term health and productivity in mind. He made room and space for fresh growth. 12 months later, I'm in a role that I never imagined I would be in, and I am loving it. And I would not have had the space to do that if those things had not been pruned back 12 months ago. And I'd not had time to revitalize, to create room and to generate new growth. It's easy to look back and see that. But at the time, I had to just really trust that God was the best gardener, that he was taking care of me, that he loved me, and I had to trust him. And there will be times where I need to surrender to the pruning process again, and again, and again, because it's part of the rhythm of life. But I know that God has got my best interest at heart, that he wants to see me producing good fruit because that's what he commanded me to do. It's what he designed me to do. And I know and believe that God is so close to me in that process. It's not vicious, it's not harmful, it's actually an act of love. And he's actually partnering with me so that I can produce the best fruit, not for me, but for his glory in all that I do. So the rhythm of life, the pendulum swing, swinging into time of resting and abiding, to swing into growth and work and fruitfulness, and swinging back into abiding, and sometimes there need to be some pruning along the way. This rhythm isn't a life hack so we can be more awesome and more productive. This rhythm is not a life hack so we can be better at the hustle and better at the busyness. It is God's design for our long-term health. And at the end of the day, it's all so that God will be glorified. So that God looks good. That's what Jesus says in chapter 15 of John in verse 8. He says, "By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples." It's so that God can be glorified in all the fruit that we produce, not just our work, not just our ministry, in our relationships, in our habits, in our growth, in the community that we're a part of. All of that is fruitfulness. And so I'd like to invite you now to take this moment to tune in and to listen to God. What is he saying? And what are you going to do about it? What is God saying today? And what are you going to do about it? Is he speaking to you about rest rhythms? About this opportunity that we have in January, or maybe an opportunity that you haven't in another time, to rest and to abide so that you can swing into fruitfulness at a healthy pace, at a healthy rhythm? Is he challenging you to make time in your schedule to rest first? Or is God speaking to you about pruning? As you come to him with all the good things that are on your plate, is he inviting you into a time of trust and of pruning? For me in that pruning season, it was a ministry commitment, but maybe for you as you abide, like what is it that God is bringing to your attention that needs pruning? It could be anything, because pruning is part of the rhythm of life. Or is God simply inviting you to abide in his presence, to rest in him, to pause in his presence? As we respond today, I'd love to invite you to stand where you are, to stand in his presence. And if you feel comfortable, to place your hands out in front of you or use your body in a way that allows you to have a moment of surrender and openness to God, whether that's closing your eyes or placing out your hands. When I was preparing for this message, I had a picture of God's open arms saying, "Come to me, abide in me, take a breath, I'm here, abide in my presence, be recharged, receive my strength and my hope and my peace, the things that only I can provide you, the things that I can sustain you with." This picture of a God the Father with open arms saying, "Come to me, abide in me." And we get to respond in that moment by saying, "Yes, God, you're all I want. You're the only thing that I want right now, Father. I want to abide in you. I want to rest in you. There's nothing else that can give me what I need. I want to soak in your presence, Father God." So we're going to sing a song called "Nothing Else." And we're going to sing the words, "I just want you, God." And so I invite you, between you and God, no one else. This is a moment between you and God, wherever you are, to take a moment to abide in his presence. There's nothing else you need to worry about right now. Abide in his good presence. Let's sing together.